Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, staring at the stars displayed on the forward screen. This was the moment humanity had dreamed of since the first time they gazed into the night sky. Today, they would test their first, faster-than-light ship and attempt a journey to another star system. Compared to the massive vessels seen in science fiction, the Horizon was small. It held only 47 people and carried enough provisions for 6 months. Dr. Lisa Parker had spent 8 years designing the quantum drive that made this mission possible. She had worked tirelessly alongside engineer Pete Collins to ensure every part functioned flawlessly. Morrison studied his crew and felt immense pride. These were Earth's finest pioneers to sail the stars. Commander Alex Turner stood nearby, rechecking the navigation arrays. Dr. Kevin Walsh sat poised at his station, ready to analyze anything they encountered at Proxima Centauri. The plan was simple: jump to Proxima, gather readings, and return home. The entire voyage should take only 3 days. Morrison had rehearsed the mission countless times in simulators. Nothing could possibly go wrong on such a short, direct flight. From engineering, Lisa Parker reported that the quantum drive stood ready. All status panels glowed green. Mission Control authorized the sequence. Morrison gave the order to prepare for humanity's first interstellar leap. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8, 7. His heart raced with excitement. 6, 4. This was history being written. 3, 2, 1. Jump. The stars vanished. Darkness held them for a breathless instant. Then the screen erupted with impossible colors, blinding light, and violent motion. What filled the display was not Proxima's quiet void, but an armada of colossal ships. Some resembled crystal cathedrals, refracting light into breathtaking cascades. Others appeared alive, their surfaces flowing and reshaping. Energy beams slashed between them in searing hues painful to watch. Explosions erupted like cosmic fireworks. The crystal vessels unleashed lances that sliced through asteroids with ease. Living ships sprouted new weapons from their bodies, returning fire with equal fury. Both sides deployed hundreds of craft, maneuvering in flawless formations. Commander Turner broke the silence first, his whisper tight with awe. They had dropped into the heart of an alien war. Dr. Parker rushed onto the bridge, stared at the display, and went pale. A solar flare must have skewed their navigation, she said. They were nowhere near Proxima. They could be anywhere in the galaxy. The battle raged on, vast and terrible, yet none of the alien fleets acknowledged the fragile human craft adrift among them. Morrison watched crystalline titans and living leviathans annihilate each other with weapons strong enough to shatter planets. The Horizon carried nothing more than a few mining lasers. Abruptly, alarms screamed through the bridge. Turner reported 3 crystal vessels disengaging from the melee, closing in on their position. Each was more than 10 times the size of the human ship. Dr. Walsh's sensors detected probing energy scanning their hull. The aliens were studying them. Morrison understood the gravity of the moment. Humanity's fate would be shaped by his response. Whether they became allies or enemies hinged on his next decision. The crystal ships glided nearer, their surfaces gleaming like stained glass cathedrals, both beautiful and terrifying. They also carried weapons powerful enough to reduce the Horizon to dust within seconds. Commander Turner urged retreat. The quantum drive remained charged, and they could jump away before the alien vessels closed in. Dr. Parker agreed, insisting they return to Earth and warn humanity about the war raging here. Jake weighed the choices. They could flee home, leaving the aliens unaware of humanity's existence, or remain and face whatever awaited them. His gaze swept over his crew, finding fear in their expressions, but also curiosity and resolve. Though answer came to him with startling clarity. He ordered a channel open to the advancing crystal ships. He had no idea whether they could understand human speech, yet he chose the most direct human gesture he knew. He greeted them, explained. They were only passing through, and asked to speak with whoever commanded their fleet. The alien ships froze in place. For an agonizing moment, nothing occurred. Jake wondered if they even used radios, or if their communication was utterly alien. Then the comm system erupted with sounds unlike anything humans had ever encountered. Dr. Parker hurried to her console, activating the universal translator she had designed for just such a mission. It relied on mathematical constants, patterns that should resonate with any intelligent mind. She fed the alien signals into the computer and waited. To everyone's shock, the program began producing results faster than anticipated. Within minutes, it deciphered the structure of their speech. The beings identified themselves as the crystalline hegemony. They wanted to know what sort of vessel the humans were piloting. Jake answered with honesty. They were explorers from a world called Earth, thrown off course by a navigation mishap. They meant no harm, only to understand what they were witnessing. The response stunned the crew. The crystal entities admitted they had never encountered a species that met a military boarding attempt by requesting conversation. They demanded to know whether humans were allied with their enemies. Jake stared at the screen, the war raging on beyond them. He understood then that they had stepped into something infinitely more perilous than a simple first contact mission. They had wandered into the core of a galactic war. Yet Jake Morrison had spent his career solving crises others deemed impossible. He studied his crew again, seeing the determination that had driven humanity from primitive caves to the threshold of the stars. They were frightened and unprepared, but ready nonetheless. The crystal ships still awaited an answer regarding humanity's alliances. Jake made a choice that would echo across history. He spoke the truth. Humanity had no allies, no enemies, and no knowledge of any of the species engaged in this war. They were explorers, nothing more. The crystalline hegemony's reply shifted everything. They declared such neutrality impossible. In their galaxy, every civilization belonged to one faction or another. There were no outsiders. In this ancient war, neutrality itself was unheard of. Humanity, Jake realized, had become a riddle every empire would want solved. Word spread faster than he thought possible. The hegemony broadcast messages across its territory, describing the strange newcomers who had appeared in the midst of battle. Within hours, every major faction knew of humanity's sudden arrival. Soon Morrison found himself communicating with 3 alien powers. After the crystalline beings came vessels resembling living leviathans, breathing, pulsing like titanic spaceborne creatures. They identified themselves as the Bio Collective. Next arrived ships too strange to view directly, bending light and twisting perception. These belonged to the psionic dominion. Commander Turner felt utterly unprepared. Academy training had covered hypothetical first contact with one species, never 3 rival empires at once. And now, by circumstance alone, he had become humanity's first diplomat among the stars. Each alien faction assumed the humans were secretly aligned with their enemies, allies of their enemies. That was what every faction suspected. The crystalline hegemony believed humans were advanced bio-collective creations, engineered to appear harmless. The bio-collective suspected humanity were psionic dominion infiltrators, concealing immense mental powers behind clever technology. The psionic dominion, in turn, insisted humans were crystalline machines disguised as biological life. Dr. Lisa Parker worked tirelessly to keep the universal translator functioning as streams of messages arrived from all 3 factions. Each demanded information about human science, weapons, and alliances. They dangled promises of wealth and knowledge beyond imagination if humanity would take a side in their endless war. The offers were dazzling. The hegemony pledged technology capable of transforming barren worlds into perfect paradises. The Bio-Collective promised genetic mastery, extending human lifespans into millennia. The Psionic Dominion claimed they could unlock psychic abilities, telekinesis, telepathy, and communication across interstellar distances without machines. Yet Jake sensed something unsettling behind every generous pledge. These were civilizations spanning thousands of systems, wielding weapons able to annihilate planets, yet all seemed strangely desperate to win over a single fragile human ship. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Rachel Ford received the most extraordinary transmission in history. Despite quantum relays, the message still took hours to arrive, and when it did, everything changed. She convened an emergency summit of world leaders, calling in scientists, generals, and diplomats from every nation. Dr. Kevin Walsh was pulled from his research lab and rushed to Washington to interpret Jake Morrison's discoveries. Humanity's leaders struggled to comprehend the truth. For ages they had asked if they were alone. Now the answer came back not only as proof of alien life, but confirmation of three vast empires locked in a brutal, centuries-long war. Earth was suddenly a small, fragile world, adrift in a perilous galaxy. Dr. Walsh analyzed the alien data Morrison transmitted, astonished by what he uncovered. The crystalline hegemony had reshaped entire systems into flawless technological marvels. Their planets gleamed with living crystal architecture and machinery that never failed. The Bio-Collective impressed even more by their mastery of biology, reshaping life to thrive anywhere. Their citizens could survive in vacuum or under crushing gas giant pressure, immune to age and disease, endlessly evolving. The Psionic Dominion's powers appeared supernatural to human science. They projected thoughts across infinite distances, moved matter with their minds, and their leaders could sway the emotions of whole populations. A society founded entirely on the mind's strength. Each faction possessed abilities far beyond human comprehension, yet they had battled one another for more than 5 centuries, with no victory in sight. The war consumed endless resources, locking them into stalemate and preventing expansion. Commander Turner began to realize the terrifying truth. Humanity had inadvertently become the most valuable prize in galactic politics. Every side now watched Earth, waiting to see where the newcomers would stand. They assumed no species could remain neutral, that eventually the humans would choose allies and take part in their eternal conflict, enemies on every side. The 3 alien rulers extended formal invitations for Jake Morrison to visit their capitals and discuss potential alliances. Supreme Overlord Carthul of the Psionic Dominion offered an audience at his palace on a world where thoughts shaped reality itself. Prime Synthesis Node Veltar of the Bio-Collective suggested a gathering within a living city that had grown from the surface of an ocean planet. Grand Constructor Hexmere of the Crystalline Hegemony proposed meeting aboard a station, carved from a single flawless crystal. Jake debated the offers with his officers. Dr. Parker warned that entering any faction's territory might appear as choosing sides. Dr. Walsh argued they needed far more knowledge before committing to anything. Commander Turner feared that refusing all invitations might insult every faction at once. The solution came unexpectedly from the aliens themselves. They proposed a neutral site, Nexus Prime, the only station in the galaxy recognized as common ground in the endless war. There, all 3 powers could meet without immediate combat. Jake accepted, though he suspected it might be a trap. He selected a small delegation, Parker and Turner among them, while the rest of the crew remained with the horizon, ready to escape if necessary. On Earth, news of the summit spread chaos and hope in equal measure. President Ford addressed humanity, declaring they faced the greatest trial in history. She announced a global council to prepare for what Jake might learn at Nexus Prime. Around the world, cooperation surged. Engineer Carol Price led teams developing spacecraft designs inspired by fragments of alien data. General Robert Hayes strengthened planetary defenses, not from fear of invasion, but to prepare for the unknown. Soon the human ship was escorted by the might of three empires: crystalline dreadnoughts, massive living cruisers, and spectral vessels straddling dimensions unseen. Traveling within such a fleet, Jake realized he was en route to the most significant diplomatic encounter the galaxy had ever witnessed. Centuries of hatred would pause, if only briefly, because humanity had stumbled onto the stage. He wondered, what kind of beings could wage war for 500 years without imagining another solution? Nexus Prime loomed ahead, dwarfing even his imagination. The station spanned hundreds of miles, its vast districts built in radically different styles, gleaming. Crystal halls, organic forests, and impossible structures that shifted through dimensions. Vessels of countless alien races were docked, each port tailored for species Jake could barely comprehend. As the humans entered, they passed corridors thronged with life forms beyond description, entities floating in liquid spheres, bodies of radiant energy, creatures with too many limbs, mechanical beings of wires and steel, and others that changed form with every step. Strangely, Jake felt calm amid the chaos. Dr. Parker moved eagerly with her tablet, recording every detail like a scientist on a field trip rather than on humanity's most perilous mission. Turner stayed vigilant, but curiosity flickered in, his eyes more than fear. At last, the delegation reached the Grand Assembly at Nexus Prime's core. Inside the cavernous chamber, the three leaders awaited. Supreme Overlord Carthol of the Psionic Dominion sat upon a throne suspended in the air, his form mostly humanoid yet marked by pale blue skin and eyes that radiated inner light. Prime Synthesis Node, Veltar of the Bio Collective, stood nearby, her body constantly reshaping. At times, she appeared as a tall, green-skinned woman, at others a many-limbed, tentacled creature, her voice transmitted through speakers as her mouths transformed too quickly to form words. Finally, Grand Constructor Hexmere of the Crystalline Hegemony stood apart, the most alien of them all, his living crystal body scattering light in dazzling, painful patterns. Follow. When he spoke, his voice carried like a melody played across, fragile glass. Each alien ruler assumed the humans would be awed by their dominance, ready to beg for protection or a place in their faction. They had polished speeches prepared, describing both the blessings of alliance and the doom of choosing opposition. They waited for Jake to collapse in reverence before their majesty. Instead, Jake glanced around the lavish chamber, complimented the decor, and casually asked what the actual problem was. The three alien sovereigns froze in disbelief. Supreme Overlord Carthol had governed billions for millennia. Every race that had entered his throne room had trembled or bowed. Yet here stood a single human, treating them like peers at a business meeting. Dr. Parker calmly drew her tablet and began practical inquiries. Trade routes across star systems, how resources were divided, and what prior efforts had been made to mediate factional disputes. She took notes like a scholar at a symposium, not a guest before galactic tyrants. Prime Synthesis Node. Veltar attempted to impress by shifting into a grotesque form, claws like razors and multiple heads snarling. She expected screams. Instead, Parker asked if it hurt to transform and whether shape-shifting demanded extra calories, sounding genuinely curious about the biology behind it. Grand Constructor Hexmere unveiled vast holograms of crystal worlds, gleaming cities spanning continents. His voice swelled with pride as he explained how chaos had been purged and order perfected. He anticipated awe. Instead, Jake inquired about managing overpopulation and whether citizens grew restless in flawless cities. Carthol, insulted, resorted to psionics, determined to probe the human's mind for hidden weapons or strategy. Never had his dominion failed to subjugate thought. But instead of secrets, he found Jake idly wondering if the aliens served coffee and when lunch might be. The attempt recoiled strangely. Jake sensed the intrusion, not with terror, but fascination. He began questioning Carthol about the mechanics of telepathy, whether it caused fatigue, and if psychic gifts could aid the mentally ill or enhance interspecies communication. Meanwhile, Earth's reaction baffled observers. Cloaked scouts from every faction monitored human settlements, expecting hysteria, mobilization, or retreat. Instead, they saw humanity doing what it always did when faced with the unknown. Schools introduced xenobiology and interstellar politics. Researchers gathered to examine alien sciences. Engineers like Carol Price drew up spacecraft designs. Generals like Robert Hayes drilled defenses, but also studied alien tactics as lessons. Reports to alien capitals all carried the same conclusion: human. Society had not cracked, nor panicked. They treated the galactic revelation as a chance to study. Such behavior defied precedent. President Rachel Ford held daily briefings on Jake's progress, but also ensured schools, hospitals, and civil functions continued. She balanced history's greatest contact with steady governance. At Nexus Prime, the three leaders grew furious. They promised impossible rewards and threatened ruinous reprisals. Jake heard them out, always respectful, yet his replies pressed beyond short-term gains. When immortality was offered, he asked what meaning existed in endless life and whether eternity dulled joy. When crystal utopias were promised, he wondered who would maintain them and what of those who desired difference. When psychic mastery was proposed, he asked why fear mattered more than... Disaster struck when they attempted to create a device to transcend physical form. Instead of elevating the species, the experiment split them into three incomplete aspects. Some became beings of pure technology, obsessed with perfection. Others turned into biological entities, endlessly adapting. The rest became psychic explorers of the mind. Each retained only a fraction of what their ancestors once possessed. Forgetting their shared origin, they saw one another not as kin, but as enemies. For 5,000 years, they had unknowingly waged war against themselves. Lisa revealed her findings to Jake Morrison and Commander Alex Turner. The two stared at the data, stunned. The greatest conflict in galactic history was nothing more than a tragic misunderstanding. Three branches of one people had spent millennia trying to annihilate each other, never realizing they were once whole. Jake finally understood why each faction so desperately courted allies. They were incomplete, searching to regain what was missing. The hegemony clung to technology because they longed for the biological adaptability lost. The Bio Collective sought genetic mastery because they lacked the psychic strengths of their ancestors. The psionic dominion shared telepathy because they yearned for the technological mastery that was no longer theirs. The humans knew they had to bring this truth before the leaders, though it was fraught with risk. Learning that your civilization had slaughtered itself for thousands of years would be devastating. Some might embrace reunion with joy. Others could descend into fury at the wasted lives and centuries of war. Lisa called for another meeting with Supreme Overlord Karul, Prime Synthesis Node Veltar, and Grand Constructor Hexmir. She claimed to hold crucial revelations about the origins of their conflict. Reluctantly, the three rulers agreed, doubtful, that a mere human could illuminate secrets their own scholars had missed. When the assembly reconvened, the chamber bristled with tension. For days, the leaders had puzzled over humanity's refusal to fit their expectations. Jake's rejection of alliance baffled them, and Lisa's fascination with history seemed almost irrelevant. Yet when Lisa activated her holographic display, the air shifted. She began with the oldest recovered records from each archive. At first, the alien rulers dismissed her conclusions as naive misreadings of their past. But as she layered evidence upon evidence, their certainty began to falter. Evidence. Their perspectives began to shift. The records Lisa presented were inscribed, in languages so ancient that each civilization had nearly forgotten how to decipher them. Using advanced human linguistic programs, she translated the long-neglected texts that had been dismissed for millennia. The proof was irrefutable, even though it overturned everything the three empires believed about their own origins. Grand Constructor Hexamir was the first to comprehend the weight of Lisa's revelation. His crystalline frame brightened as his processors raced to verify the data. He accessed his species' most restricted archives and uncovered fragments of synthesis that aligned with Lisa's findings. Prime Synthesis Node. Veltar's form cycled through countless shapes as she struggled to adapt. Her biology strained against knowledge that shattered her entire sense of self. She had always believed her people were the final pinnacle of evolution. To learn they were fragments of something incomplete was nearly unbearable. Supreme Overlord Carthol attempted to use his psychic reach to pierce Lisa's mind, seeking deception or error, but what he sensed was only honest curiosity and a genuine wish to aid their fractured societies. She truly believed she had uncovered the answer to their endless conflict. The chamber sat in silence for nearly an hour while the three rulers cross-checked Lisa's evidence against their most sacred records. When at last they spoke, their tones carried emotions buried for ages. Hexir's crystal glow dimmed as though with grief. Veltar assumed a smaller, frailer shape, stripped of her usual dominance. Carthol's radiant eyes flickered, as if he was losing his iron grip over his thoughts. This revelation should have secured peace and unity. Instead, it ignited a new crisis that threatened to unravel the galaxy. Each empire turned its fury on the others for centuries of pointless destruction. The Crystal Hegemony accused the Bio Collective of betraying their technological roots. The Bio Collective condemned the Psionic Dominion for abandoning reality in pursuit of mental supremacy. The Psionic Dominion retaliated by accusing both of straying from the true evolution of mind. Commander Turner watched three ancient civilizations wrestle with truths that humanity had long accepted. Forgiveness, adaptability, and humility were second nature to humans. But these species had become too rigid to accept change or question their most fundamental dogmas. Jake Morrison realized the truth alone would not end the Galactic War. The three factions had to relearn cooperation after 5 millennia apart. They needed to remember they were one people, not shattered fragments. Small movements within each empire began calling for reunion, but the majority refused to ally with those they had been raised to despise. Some leaders even demanded harsher war, branding their enemies traitors who had forsaken the true path. Tensions escalated as word of Lisa's revelation spread across the stars. Lesser species caught between their wars demanded answers for centuries of needless suffering. Allies reconsidered loyalties, some defecting or declaring neutrality, others bracing for civil war within their own domains. Jake stood on the observation deck of Nexus Prime, staring at vast fleets assembling outside the station. Humanity's discovery had not ended the Galactic War. It had made it more perilous than ever. 3 incomplete civilizations were now preparing to destroy themselves and everyone nearby, simply because they could not accept that only by uniting could they become whole once more. Jake realized humanity had accidentally shaken something already fragile. Now it fell on them to find a way to mend it before the galaxy tore itself apart. The question remained whether such a young species could teach civilizations older than memory itself how to heal wounds that had festered for 5,000 years. The answer came not from superior weapons or unmatched technology, but through the most human response possible. Jake Morrison stunned the galaxy when he openly admitted that humanity was flawed and prone to mistakes, just like everyone else. Standing. Before the 3 rulers in the Grand Assembly, Jake spoke of Earth's turbulent history: wars, ecological ruin, social strife. He explained that humanity had survived by learning to work together, not because they were flawless, but because survival demanded it. Cooperation was the only path forward. Dr. Kevin Walsh, brought to Nexus Prime for the crisis, proposed what came to be known as the Integration Protocol. Instead of forcing the factions back into one people at once, they would cooperate gradually, each maintaining their strengths. The crystal hegemony would provide structure and technology, the bio-collective would guide adaptation and resource growth, while the psionic dominion would handle planning and coordination. At first, the rulers resisted, until Lisa Parker unveiled something extraordinary. She had modeled their lost civilization with human computers. The synthesis had never been three isolated entities. Every being embodied crystal mastery, biological resilience, and psychic reach. None of the current factions alone could achieve such completeness. During negotiations, Supreme Overlord Carthel probed Jake's mind again. What he found startled him. Jake feared the weight of his decisions, feared failure, yet he made choices anyway because someone had to bear responsibility. That courage shifted Carthel's understanding of leadership. Meanwhile, Commander Turner collaborated with alien militaries to design new cooperation systems. He introduced humans' simple methods of resolution, talking until compromise was found, and if not, bringing in neutral mediators. For species locked in war for millennia, the approach seemed almost miraculous. The turning point came when Veltar chose to merge biologically with volunteers from the other two factions. For the first time in 5,000 years, crystal, minds, and psychic power flowed through the same body. The union lasted only minutes, but it revived memory of what their ancestors had been. Hexier followed by integrating bio-collective growth into crystal architecture, creating hybrid technology beyond anything seen before. Psionic input allowed thought-controlled systems. Their first joint project was a new station orbiting Nexus. Prime, crystal for structure, biology for life support, and psychic webs for instant communication. Built in weeks rather than decades, it proved what unity could achieve. President Rachel Ford established the Terran Mediation Council with bases on Earth and the Joint Station. Human and alien diplomats trained together to handle disputes. 4. The first time, the galaxy saw an alternative to conquest, partnership. Engineer Carol Price worked alongside alien geniuses. Crystal builders taught her self-repairing materials. Biologists taught her to grow machines. Psychics helped design thought-based controls. Together, they forged breakthroughs no single species could dream of. Soon, smaller civilizations sought their help. The Council mediated disputes over territory, resources, and belief, using techniques that felt almost magical to those who had. Never imagined enemies could become allies. Lisa Parker founded the Galactic Historical Research Institute, uncovering forgotten connections behind conflicts and preventing countless wars. The three great powers themselves began to evolve.